Every guy gets a share. 5 shares is plenty.
6 shares. Don't forget the guy playing the job.
He thinks he can sit it out and still take a slice. I know why they call him the Joker.
The Dark Knight has cemented itself as one of the foundational pieces of media in the modern superhero landscape. This intricately plotted, deeply character-driven story propelled the genre to never-before-seen heights. Director Christopher Nolan's masterful filmmaking is perfectly shown across every frame of the film's 4-minute and 47-second opening scene, a sequence so well choreographed that it might be called perfect.
And here we go.
One word defines the ambition behind Nolan's superhero magnum opus: scope. Coming off the back of the franchise resurrecting Batman Begins, Nolan and company had the grandest of ambitions for their sophomore effort. They wanted to take the canvas that they established with Begins and extrapolate it out to be a crime epic worthy of the likes of Heat, Once Upon a Time in America, or The Godfather. And against all odds, they succeeded. And this is nowhere more on display than in the opening shot of the film. Nolan spared no expense in bringing an epic scale to the project by attempting something that had never been done before: shoot full sequences on 35mm IMAX cameras. For those that don't know, this is what the IMAX ratio of 1:4:3:1 looks like. And this is what the rest of The Dark Knight in traditional widescreen ratio of 2:3:9:1 looks like. The IMAX aspect ratio has more room for compositional elements on the top of and bottom of the screen. When Nolan decided to shoot 28 minutes of the film in IMAX, there were only 4 cameras that could even shoot the IMAX format in the world. But he believed it would be absolutely necessary to capture the sense of scope and visual spectacle he was looking for in order to propel the film into being an epic. The scene opens with 2 criminals in clown masks breaking a window out of a high-rise and firing a zip line at a nearby building. The tension-filled soundtrack and illicit activity immediately sets up a dramatic tension that harkens back to classic crime capers. The city of Gotham is nothing if not synonymous with crime, and this film cements that idea right out of the gate. We quickly move to a wide shot of another criminal waiting on a street corner, holding a duffel bag and carrying a clown mask. We next intercut between the criminals on the roof ziplining across a cavernous expanse onto the roof of the adjacent building, and the 3 criminals in the truck discussing how many men are involved in the heist. We also learn that this project has been set up by a mastermind named the Joker. Unlike many superhero and comic book movies today, who cram the running time to the gills with cameos, Easter eggs, and setups for future projects, this opening's mention of the Joker services the character in a distinctly different way. It immediately sets up the Joker as someone bigger than street level. Nolan directs this sequence superbly. The audience understands the geography of what's happening, how many people are involved, and what they are doing. This is doubly impressive when considering that all the characters are basically wearing the same mask. Normally, you just give close-ups on the faces of the actors to help an audience track who's who. But with everyone wearing ostensibly the same clown face, that's a tall order to accomplish quickly. Nolan relies on the voices of the actors and the staging within the frame to communicate importance to the audience. As the criminals exit the truck and enter the bank, we focus on the final clown holding the duffel bag. Without giving the man any additional identifying markers or dialogue, Nolan is reaffirming that the man and the bag are important. When the criminals storm into the bank, we follow them with multiple sweeping Steadicam shots, giving the scene movement and excitement from a visual standpoint. It puts us with them, storming the facility. Next, the duffel bag clown opens his bag, revealing that it's filled with grenades and explosives. As a bank teller triggers a silent alarm and the criminals on the roof notice that it wasn't attempting to call the cops, but a private line, that can only mean one thing: organized crime. We get a quick insert of iconic character actor William Fichtner's bank manager looking apprehensive, and then we follow the duffel bag criminal as he hands out grenades to the bank hostages and employees. William Fichtner pulls out a sawed-off shotgun, stalks towards the bank robbers, and starts screaming,
"You have any idea who you're stealing from? You and your friends are dead!"
This serves 2 purposes. It serves as a payoff to the setup of the phone call line, and it cements that this institution isn't owned by a corporation. It's backed by criminals. It also firmly distinguishes that the criminals we've been following aren't a part of organized crime. They're an outside element, coming into an already corrupt ecosystem. The truck driver and the duffel bag clown dive behind a desk, and when the driver asks,
He's out, right?
the duffel bag clown thinks for a split second, then nods yes. As the driver stands up, he's hit with a shotgun blast, sending the duffel bag criminal into action. It's apparent that the additional focus and emphasis placed on this clown in the opening shots were for a good reason. Him falsely identifying the number of shotgun shells the bank manager had left was a tactic. He wanted the driver to be shot. But why? Is he working with an ulterior motive supplied by the Joker? We cut to the vault room where the driver and the rooftop criminal have a small exchange. The rooftop criminal confesses that he killed his fellow zipliner and that the Joker told him to do it, to which the driver retorts,
Funny, he told me something similar.
We jump cut to moments later when they've loaded millions of dollars into 9 duffel bags. The truck driver says,
I'm betting the Joker told you to kill me as soon as we loaded the cash.
to which the other criminal responds,
No, I killed a bus driver.
acting as a setup for the highly unexpected and perfectly staged shot where a bus careens through the front of the building and kills the truck driver. This is a tonally perfect adaptation of the Joker's goofy antics from the Silver Age appearances, but evolved to put into Christopher Nolan's grounded and more realistic world. The static camera serves to accentuate the absurdity of this violent act. After loading the bus, killing the driver, and having an interaction with the bank manager, the duffel bag clown unmasks, revealing himself to be the Joker. This opening serves as both an introduction to the character of the Joker, the world of Gotham, and how those two puzzle pieces fit together. And just to make sure the audience can track what's happening, the Joker is introduced 3 times in the scene, visually twice and verbally once. This goes back to the idea of the scope that Nolan is working at. He's not going to just give his villain one hero shot, he's going to construct a whole scene that acts as both a character introduction, world introduction, and film introduction. This prologue sets up the narrative emphasis on choreography, action, and the unreliable narrator that is the Joker. It's a marker that as the film progresses, the Joker is going to be orchestrating events and pulling the strings of multiple factions of people. It also brilliantly illustrates that the Joker isn't some aloof criminal watching these events from a penthouse. He's a man with his boots on the ground, carrying out the dirty work just as diligently as he planned it.
Can't rely on anyone these days. You gotta do everything yourself. Don't we?
The Dark Knight uses this opening to create a sense of scale and scope that no other modern superhero film rivals. One of the primary reasons for its narrative success is because of the fact that the film actually has an opening scene, a bite-sized chunk of narrative to pull the viewer in. It has an opening shot that's significant. It has a style and a point of view that so many superhero films just can't afford to because they're attempting to squeeze themselves into an overarching narrative of multiple films. It's action-oriented and filmed on a scale literally never attempted before in the history of cinema. The Dark Knight has stood the test of time, regardless of the fact that there are literally tens of superhero films released a year. The prestige and narrative propulsion that people connect to from this film flow directly from this opening.
I'm a night-stalking, crime-fighting vigilante. I don't feel anything emotionally except for rage.
Everyone knows who Batman is, but prior to 2017, the vast majority of DC Comics' Batverse was still waiting to be faithfully translated to the silver screen. Then the Lego Batman movie happened. It could have been a glorified toy commercial, but in what came as a delightful surprise to pretty much everyone, it turned out to be the ultimate cinematic love letter to the Dark Knight and one of the most faithful Batman adaptations ever.
I've seen you go through similar phases in 2016 and 2012 and 2008 and 2005 and 1997 and 1995 and 1992 and 1989.
By the early 1980s, the general public mostly associated Batman with the campy 1966 Adam West TV show. A darker, grittier version of the character managed to fight his way onto the screens in the 1989 movie simply titled Batman, directed by Tim Burton. Ever since then, film audiences have been treated almost exclusively to increasingly dark, serious, and realistic takes on the Caped Crusader. The Lego Batman, who appeared in 2014's Lego Movie and who was modeled on the Batman from Burton's movie, was a great satire of these black, body-armored, gravelly voiced movie Batmen.
Emmett, this is my boyfriend, Batman.
I'm Batman.
His role in the original Lego Movie was to be a romantic rival for the protagonist, Emmett. But along the way, Batman was featured in some of the film's most memorable bits and became something of a breakout character.
If anybody has black parts, I need them, okay? I only work in black. And sometimes very, very dark gray.
Still, it wasn't obvious that he had a tale of his own worth telling, much less one that demanded a spin-off. So when the Lego Batman movie was announced, fans understandably suspected a cash grab. It would be the feature directorial debut of Chris McKay, who had worn a number of hats on the Lego movie but was still greatly an unknown commodity to the public. Turns out, McKay knew what he was doing. From a world-building perspective, Lego Batman instantly realizes what is by far the most expansive version of the Batverse ever to make it onto the big screen. Sure, it all doubles as commercials for Lego figures and playsets, but everything happens in a way that supports the story and character journeys. The film only takes minutes to establish all of Gotham City, Wayne Manor, the Batcave, the Batmobile, the Bat Signal, and a Commissioner Gordon who is used to turning it on every time he's in trouble.
Hey kids, who wants a shot from the merch guy? Great,
It also immediately shows us Batman's marquee supervillains, like the Joker, the Riddler, the Penguin, Catwoman, and Two-Face. This stands in sharp contrast to the more serious takes, which tended to start with origin stories and then build and populate Batman's world piecemeal over the course of several films. Lego Batman is as far from an origin story as you can get. It just dives into a fully formed Batverse, and even many of Batman's more obscure adversaries, like Crazy Quilt, Eraser, Polka Dot Man, Mime, and Condiment King, get to make appearances.
Okay, are you making some of those up?
Nope, they're all real. Probably worth the Google.
The film is full of fun Batman Easter eggs and just generally gushes with love for all things Batman. Given the hyper-detailing, the Lego Batman movie probably could have rested its case on nostalgia alone, but instead, it also delivered what is among the most complete and heartfelt Batman stories ever in a movie. The plot is pretty simple. Despite Batman being the celebrated hero of Gotham, Bruce Wayne spends his life sad, alone, and trying not to think about how much he misses his family. His life is so empty he can walk around Wayne Manor in a bathrobe and cowl. It doesn't matter. There's no one to hide his secret from. But one night, he accidentally adopts plucky, wide-eyed orphan Dick Grayson, and the two team up to take on the Joker. Over the course of their adventure, Batman begins to feel a fatherly pride to his new ward, who, of course, becomes Robin. Meanwhile, the Joker is hurt and outraged because Batman won't admit their rivalry is special.
You mean nothing to me.
So he gets himself sent to the Phantom Zone, where he recruits monsters from other franchises, like Sauron, Lord Voldemort, King Kong, and a bunch of others, to help him attack Gotham. The scale of the threat forces Batman to confront his fears. To win the fight, he has to open himself up to being a part of and working with a new family that includes Robin, Alfred, and the new police commissioner, Barbara Gordon.
Why did you build this thing with only one seat?
Because last I checked, I only had one butt.
But to save Gotham City from falling into an abyss, he also has to team up with all of his villains, which means fessing up to his special relationship with the Joker. Chris McKay was a lifelong Batman fan, and it showed in every frame of the movie. He crafted a heartfelt ode to found family where the assembled Batverse itself turned out to be the hero of the story. And he did it while simultaneously respecting the mythology of the Lego movie.
If Joker's bomb were to go off, these plates would break apart, plunging every Gotham citizen into the eternal abyss that smells like dirty underwear.
Audiences loved it, critics loved it, and most importantly, Batman fans loved it.
What are you doing?
Punching Bane.
That was unnecessary.
The Lego Batman movie sounded like a stupid idea in the abstract, but that actually turned out to be its greatest strength. It meant it didn't have to worry about seeming goofy. While we still have yet to see a live-action kid version of Robin, the Lego Batman movie built its whole story around the Batman-Robin relationship.
My name's Richard Grayson, but all the kids at the orphanage call me Dick.
Well, children can be cruel.
Yeah.
And the inherently goofy nature of Lego Batman made it easy to hand-wave off some of the problematic aspects of a billionaire using an orphan to perform dangerous superhero work.
Can we use code names? Mine could be Robin.
As in the small, Midwestern, frail bird.
Yeah, and I already have a catchphrase. Tweet, tweet on the street.
Hard pass.
And when he's allowed into the Batcave, his reaction is nothing short of wondrous and rapturous delight. Batman thrusts him into the field on a whim, and he's hilariously great at it, so we're never worried about Lego Robin. It all works because the tone of the overall world is so silly. The aesthetic of the Lego characters also make it so easy to poke light at some of the comic book's arguably dated wardrobe choices, like Robin's green underwear and bare legs.
Pants are just a little tight. I don't know if I could throw a kick or jump in them. I got an idea. Rip! It's better.
It wouldn't have worked in live action, but here it serves as a knowing wink to the camera and sets up Batman for a joke.
I could only look you in the eyes right now.
That kind of thing freed viewers up to focus on the story of two lonely orphans who become each other's found family, without getting bogged down in the kinds of troublesome real-world details that had frustrated previous attempts. Another element of the Batman universe that LEGO Batman was able to put back at the center of the storytelling was family, specifically the Bat family, which is the name fans use to describe the core characters in Batman's life. But LEGO Batman took the idea of the Bat family to its furthest extreme, and by the time the movie is over, the whole city is effectively Batman's family. Bruce opens himself up to being part of a family again, and he gains his whole world. Most fitting of all is that Bruce's new family forms around Batman. Unlike the more serious tone takes, being the Dark Knight isn't a curse to bear in this universe. In the LEGO movie, being Batman is a good thing, and it saves Bruce's life in multiple senses. No wonder Batman fans loved it. In its opening minutes, the movie establishes that LEGO Batman remembers the climaxes of Batman '89 and Nolan's Dark Knight.
What about that time with the two boats?
This is better than the two boats.
At the same time, elements of the Adam West show like Egghead and Chief O'Hara and all those wacky Silver Age comic book villains are also a part of his world. And the LEGO Batman movie is faithful to all of those experiences.
This moment right here, this is what sets the DC animated universe apart from almost every adaptation of the beloved DC Comics characters, or really any other superhero adaptation. If you're unfamiliar, this is a scene from the pilot episode of Batman Beyond. This sequel television show takes place in Gotham 50 years after the events of Batman the Animated Series. It shows an old haggard Bruce Wayne using a technologically advanced Batsuit in order to stop criminals, and yet his body just isn't up to the challenge. Despite having a heart attack, he's attempting to do the right thing, but in doing so, he's forced to cross the one line that he swore he never would: picks up a gun. This moment is brilliant character writing. Batman ends the same way he began. Would they? Well, you already know. See, guns are antithetical to Bruce Wayne. His monastic devotion to protecting the innocent from the evils of the night have evolved to the point where he has a strict moral code, a visual iconography, and only two real lines he won't cross: no killing, no guns. And all of that is broken in this moment, and we the audience know it instantly. This is something none of the live action versions of Batman have ever truly gotten correct. But also, none of those adaptations had Bruce Timm, Eric Radomski, Stan Berkowitz, and Paul Dini at the helm. But we'll get back to that. If you're unaware, the DC Animated Universe is a series of shows and films interconnected in a shared continuity. Sounds like a familiar concept now, but in the 90s it was unique. The DCAU started on September 5th, 1992. With the premiere of Batman the Animated Series. Believe it or not, it lasted all the way up until May 13, 2006, with the cancellation of Justice League Unlimited. If you're not familiar with the inner workings of that timeline, it's pretty simple. The animated series, Superman the Animated Series, New Adventures of Batman and Robin, Batman Beyond, Zeta Project, Static Shock, Justice League, and Justice League Unlimited, all there. It also included the feature films Mask of the Phantasm, Batman and Mr. Freeze Sub-Zero, Mystery of the Batwoman, Superman Brainiac Attacks, and Batman Beyond Return of the Joker. If that's a lot to remember, don't worry, you don't need to. This interconnected tapestry of films and shows produced one of the most intricate and well-crafted superhero universes ever put to screen, and it did it a solid decade before the idea of producing an interconnected cinematic universe was a fashionable thought. Because all this reminds you of something, doesn't it? Yeah, the DCAU kind of feels like the MCU or the Arrowverse, but also distinctly doesn't feel like the DCEU. Simply put, the DCAU should have been the blueprint for both the MCU, but more importantly, the DCEU. What makes it even more frustrating is that Warner Bros. Easily could have hired the minds behind the animated universe to shepherd DC's cinematic universe into existence, to help mold, well, what they've already molded in the past. They just chose not to. So let's delve a little deeper. Let's examine what is so great about the DCAU, what common attributes that it shares with the MCU and the DCU, and also where it can all go wrong. Let's see what DC's cinematic universe maybe should have done differently. Okay, so if you're familiar with the history of comics, you know that both the Marvel and DC universe were constructed bit by bit organically. Action Comics #1 and Detective Comics #27 didn't originally take place in the same worlds. And we're gonna get a little granular here, so bear with me. After National Publications saw what was working, they leaned more into the idea of caped characters and eventually put all of their caped characters together on a team. Same thing with Marvel. Stan and Jack had been creating comics for Timely, aka Marvel, for a long time prior to 1962's Fantastic Four #1. But after they started working on that project, the success begat more success, and the Marvel Universe ballooned out from there. So let's smash cut 30-ish years or so later, and the DCAU literally functioned the same. There was no plan to make a universe out of Batman the Animated Show. It was just so successful that new and interesting opportunities to tell stories kept popping up, and the creators took advantage of them. The MCU was built much the same way. The idea of an interconnected tapestry of franchises began for Marvel after former Toy Biz exec and low-key mastermind behind most of the Marvel subsequent film and television adaptations procured the rights to Iron Man. Marvel decided to launch a film studio, adapting their own intellectual property into feature films. Off the backs of the success of Fox's X-Men series and Sony's Spider-Man franchises, the Sam Raimi ones, and they followed through. The first two outings for the fledgling cinematic universe would be in the summer of '08, Iron Man with RDJ and The Hulk with Edward Norton. Both these films were solid origin films. They were intended to set the characters up for continuing adventures, and well, in one case, they succeeded. After the resounding success of Iron Man and the weird pseudo-not failure of Hulk, Marvel Studios announced on May 5th, 2008 a plan to produce a Captain America movie, a Thor movie, Iron Man 2, all of which would interconnect and lead up to an Avengers film, which if you look at it is very similar to the structure of the DCAU, which again, a decade earlier. Start with the individual pieces, organically grow them, and let them become something bigger, like, well, Justice League Unlimited. Across the street at Warner Brothers, however, DC Comics, things were a bit rocky. After the undisputed success of the MCU, WB decided that they needed their own cinematic universe off the ground. However, feeling like they were behind the 8 ball, they didn't follow the model that both the DCAU had pioneered and didn't want to appear as they were mimicking the MCU. So instead they took the opposite approach. Big team movies, then spin-offs out of it. The Launchpad film was going to be called Justice League Mortal. That's right, the first DC Universe film was going to be called Justice League Mortal. It would have depicted the titular Big Seven coming together to stop fast food tycoon and mind control enthusiast Maxwell Lord from taking over the Earth. Then an interconnected web of solo superhero outings would have spun out of that film. So the inverse of the way this should work. The product was going to be directed by Mad Max's George Miller. However, despite getting pretty far along in pre-production and having a whole film cast and being ready to shoot in Australia, the project was shelved at the last minute due to the financial crisis. DC then pivoted to attempt to follow the Marvel model. Well, things don't always go as planned. The idea was a solo Superman film. The film would share the title with a long-in-gestation sequel to Bryan Singer's Superman Returns, but would be helmed by Zack Snyder. The film ended up coming out, was a modest success at the box office, but it was by no means a runaway smash hit on the level of any of the MCU films. As such, WB executives did what executives do best and panicked and decided they needed to pull out the big guns immediately. They didn't have time to wait for establishing all the solo characters in their own films and, building character. They needed to get to the highly recognizable intellectual property front and center. This would lead to rushed and poorly conceived versions of Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice, which is a loose adaptation of both The Dark Knight Returns and Death of Superman, a heavily re-edited Suicide Squad, and, well, now, Justice League. We all know what happened there. They would eventually go on to produce Aquaman, Shazam, Wonder Woman, and Birds of Prey. So now that we have an overview of the MCU contrasted against the constantly readjusting DCEU, let's break down why Warner didn't follow the template of what they had already accomplished literally over the past 15 years prior. Remember this, the Batman holding the gun moment? That moment tells you everything you need to know about Batman. And it shows you him at the end of his arc, which is a key distinction because Batman Beyond is about passing on the mantle to the next generation. Everything Bruce Timm, Eric Adamski, and the other DCAU stalwarts took these key details as the starting points for these characters, something the MCU has in spades. And to be clear, every MCU movie isn't great. The MCU in general isn't necessarily amazing. But structurally speaking, it's hard to argue that the MCU didn't get something right. Do I love every MCU film? Not even close, but what I do know is that they understood what it meant to create their universe. Sometimes their jokey banter makes these characters feel kind of samey, but underneath all of that, they get what makes the various characters tick on a bone-deep level. Again, for the most part. Now look at the way Eric Radamski constructed the look and feel of Batman the Animated Series. All the backgrounds of the show were drawn on black paper, so that it felt like the shadows were the primary attribute Gotham had. That aesthetic choice flows directly from the character of Bruce Wayne. The fact that the governing style was Dark Deco, meaning Gothic Art Deco, also comes from Batman's history. He's a character that's been around forever, and yet he's timeless, just like the aesthetic of the show. There's computers and phones, and yet Zeppelins and old-timey radios. The world of the show is built around Batman. The show comes from his character. Same thing from the Superman show. It's bold and bright, and it's reminiscent of the Fleischer Brother cartoons, but still contemporary and modern. It's timeless and iconic. Tim Daly, the voice of Superman in the show, is so perfectly cast that an entire generation of people hear him in their head when they read Superman comics. They didn't try to make Superman grim or morally gray. They didn't try to update him for the 90s. They made him a perfect distillation of everything that had worked before. So let's juxtapose that with Man of Steel. And it doesn't really learn those lessons, does it? Look at another reasonable distillation of this: MCU Cap versus DCEU Superman. They're two sides of the same coin. Warner's was concerned that Superman would appear hokey or out of step with the times, and so they let Snyder run with a darker, more conflicted Superman and Man of Steel. In many ways, they had lost confidence in their ability of their man out of time to connect with modern audiences because his morality was something from a bygone era, in their opinion, which is exactly what Marvel chose to do with Steve Rogers and people loved. That's what they keyed in on with Steve Rogers. That's what made Captain America work. Understanding the tonality of your character and building that tonality from inside the character, not crashing that tonality onto them. Ultimately, the fact that Joey McDuffie, Bruce Timm, Stan Berkovitz, and Paul Dini were literally employees of Warner while all of this was going on is exceedingly frustrating, because this tonality is something they understood down to their core. And this tonality is exactly what has driven the separation between DC movies and Marvel movies, and arguably exactly what has made the Marvel movies more successful than the DC movies. Tonal consistency and tonal understanding. The right people for the job were right there, even if they had just been the executive producers guiding things along the way. They certainly understood these characters better than, well, maybe Zack Snyder. And that's not a shot at Zack Snyder, he's an incredible visual filmmaker. But being a good filmmaker does not give you the expertise that these men who built these worlds, these iconic worlds, had. So why weren't they involved? Well, a few reasons. Politics, money, and vision being the primary ones. However, the more important aspect of this is that they weren't ever even in the conversation because animation isn't thought of as culturally important in the same way live action film is, or television. Animation is for children, live action is for adults. The heads of the WB wanted high-profile directors and writers, despite some of them not being massive fans of the source material. The Justice League Unlimited Season 2 finale epilogue is one of the best Batman stories ever told. If you need any convincing that the DCAU team would have knocked this out of the park, this should be the front and center example. But alas, it wasn't meant to be, and honestly, it doesn't matter because the DCAU still exists and is fantastic.
A brooding billionaire vigilante, a colorful rogues gallery, and a city in need of a savior. These are the essential elements that make up a good Batman story. Some of the best Batman stories ever told were on Batman the Animated Series. Not only did it push the character of Batman and his vast supporting cast to untold heights, it also redefined what children's animation could accomplish. Which begs the question, what's the perfect episode of Batman the Animated Series? How about an episode that instead of focusing on the Dark Knight himself, puts its primary lens on his rogue gallery of villains? Batman the Animated Series is arguably the definitive version of the world's greatest detective. After literally dozens of live action and animated films, multiple TV shows, countless video games, and over 80 years of comic books, that's no easy statement to make. And yet, it's a widely held truism at this point. Its brooding atmosphere, precise character work, timeless feel, and brilliant writing have all withstood the slow grind of time. The series is even more highly regarded today than when it made its splashy debut in the early 1990s. What sets Batman the Animated Series apart from the legion of other adaptations of The Dark Knight? It all comes down to two men, Eric Radomski and Bruce Timm. These two rookie animation industry journeymen were working at Warner Brothers during the late 1980s, when, off of the breakout success of Tim Burton's Batman 1989, the powers that be decided to move ahead with a Batman Saturday morning cartoon to further solidify the character in the booming kids animation marketplace. However, what could have been a standard cheesy execution of a comic book character, like this, or like this, Radomski's out-of-the-box thinking and art directing skills, and Tim's dedication to treating the comic book source material with simultaneous reverence and seriousness proved to be a winning combination. The show's mature tone, intricate character work, and stylish execution were instantly hailed as groundbreaking. The episode that is widely hailed as the most beloved is Heart of Ice. The episode recontextualized one of the long-running, yet not particularly popular villains, Mr. Freeze, into a sympathetic and tragic character. The show completely rewrote his origin, redesigned his visual aesthetic thanks to a new character designed by Hellboy creator Mike Mignola, and cemented the show as a force to be reckoned with in the daytime animation arena. This specific episode even went on to win a Daytime Emmy for outstanding writing in an animated program. However, that's not the episode we're here to talk about today. We're going to take a look at an underappreciated episode that displays a perfect understanding of what makes Batman and his rogues gallery work. We're going to talk about Almost Got 'Em. The episode in question, number 35 of Season 1, follows 5 of Batman's villains as they sit around a table in a smoky pool hall somewhere in Gotham and play cards together. The episode alternates from each of their perspectives as they profess various occasions upon which they, quote-unquote, almost got 'em.
Nobody's come closer to snuffing the Batman than me.
From the opening title card, you know this episode is going to be something special. The slinky jazz number that the music starts playing isn't the usual brass or violin-based Danny Elfman-influenced sweeping orchestral piece. It's a slower, seedier, more intimate piece, which instantly sets the tone for the episode. Almost Got 'Em, and truly many of the standout episodes of the show, were written by Paul Dini and directed by Eric Radomski, 2 of the key creative figures behind the scenes tackling a high-concept episode of the show. You know it's going to be good right from the get-go.
I want a nice, clean game, gentlemen.
The episode opens with a table of villains playing poker. We join them in media res mid-conversation. Two-Face is saying,
I don't think it is one guy.
The other villains at the table, Penguin, Killer Croc, the Joker, and Poison Ivy, all have their suspicions about who or what is under the cowl. All of the characters' responses and dialogue are perfect. Even if you were just reading the lines on a sheet of paper, divorced of voice acting and context, you'd still be able to immediately tell who is who based on the syntax of how they speak and the things they're choosing to talk about. It's brilliant writing. With every line, Dini is driving home character, character, character. It's expressly the point of this episode. Each villain is taking turns describing how they came so close to killing the Caped Crusader. Poison Ivy tells a story about a poisonous pumpkin patch where Batman was almost rendered unconscious. However, at the last moment, he was able to use a remote control for the Batmobile to foil her plan and save himself. Two-Face tells a story about robbing the Gotham Mint. Of course, he was stealing $2 million in $2 bills with the help of a gang of henchmen nicknamed the 2-Ton Gang. What ensues is a fairly quick fight scene of Batman attempting to stop them, getting captured, strapped to a giant penny, yes, the giant penny from the Batcave, and then escaping and stopping them in classic Dick Sprang Batman style. Killer Croc claims he's come the closest to killing Batman.
I threw a rock at him!
Which is a perfectly in-character line because the Batman the Animated Series version of Croc isn't a misunderstood circus performer like in the comics. He's just an idiot. Penguin details his aviary of doom while using alliterations almost exclusively.
I find your middling machinations mildly diverting.
And Joker discusses his late-night talk show of death with a built-in laugh-o-meter, which once the audience laughter gets to a certain level, will electrocute Batman. And here's where we get the big twist revealed. After Joker finishes his story and confesses that he has Catwoman locked up in a manufacturing plant on the other side of town at this very moment, Killer Croc stands up and we see that Batman has been pretending to be Croc the whole time, which is where one of the coolest shots in all of Batman the Animated Series happens. Him standing up and the swinging light revealing the cowl in silhouette for a split second. Almost Got 'Em succeeds in ways that are unique among the adapted Batman canon. It structurally feels like a comic book from the 1960s. The multiple stories with the connecting wraparound narrative is straight from the Mort Weisinger era. Big ideas, bright characters, and Silver Age antics. The fact that each of the stories we're seeing have the point of view of the villain in question makes it even better. Batman is often thought of having one of the most unique and idiosyncratic rogue galleries of all time, and this episode is perfect evidence to that thought. Each villain has their own voice, their own style, and their own approach, which is all laced throughout the narrative. It really is a love letter to the Batman villains in question. It's played straight, even the campy or larger-than-life elements. It fully embraces how ridiculous this all is and still treats it like it's really happening. This is a show made by people who love these characters and think that because they're so larger than life, they deserve to be the stars of the show, just this once. You don't get the overly serious Batman that Christopher Nolan propelled to Oscar nominations without Batman the Animated Series, showing everyone how to both embrace the dark and brooding side of the character's universe and the brightly colored and frankly silly side as well. It's a perfect hybrid that shows you the best of both worlds. It's a crash course in everything cool about Batman. If you had never seen or watched or read any Batman material previously, you could watch this episode and instantly get a good sense of what it's all about. And that's to say nothing of the ending moment of the episode where, after Batman has helped free Catwoman, they have an emotional exchange on the rooftop where she says, "Maybe someday we can have a life without the freaks."
Maybe without masks.
Only to turn around and realize that he's vanished into the night, and then mutter,
"Almost got him."
If that's not how you end a Batman story, I don't know how.
Wait, it's not what you think.
No. I'm not gonna stand by while you hurt more innocent people.
Kids love robots. Kids love Batman. So it only makes sense that WB would try to make a Batman spin-off starring a homicidal and existentially tormented robot? The Zeta Project is without a doubt the strangest show set in the DC animated universe, and yet, it seems to be completely forgotten. The Zeta Project was a short-lived DC animated universe spin-off show created by Bob Goodman. It ran from January 27, 2001 to August 10, 2002. Originally appearing in the Batman Beyond episodes titled Zeta and Countdown, the spin-off show follows a former assassin robot who develops a conscience and goes in search of a deeper meaning.
I'm a U.S. government infiltration unit designed to replace and destroy targeted individuals.
Destroy?
But I don't want to destroy anymore.
While Batman Beyond has a staunch following of diehard fans, the Zeta Project is remembered very differently. The show had a much more comedic tone despite having a logline that seemed to purport deeper and more mature themes. We follow Rosalie, Rowan, and the titular robot nicknamed for the show as Z.
Z.
Excuse me?
That should be your name. Z. Zeta's too weird.
As they're perennially on the run from the government and evil forces who want to control Zeta. For context, at the time of Zeta's release, the DCAU, spearheaded by producers Alan Burnett and Bruce Timm, was chugging along. Batman the Animated Series was a critical darling and runaway rating success. Superman the Animated Series had redefined the enduring Big Blue Boy Scout for a generation, and Batman Beyond was a surprise, if moderate, hit. However, development executives and VPs in charge of children's animation at Warner were about to have a changing of the guard, out with the old, in with the new. While they were still hungry for more of the winning material that Tim and company were mining from DC Comics catalogs, the prevailing concern was that the animated content that was being made for kids was too mature. It was pulling in more of the older kids and the teenage crowd. So when the studio asked for more ideas for DCAU spin-off properties, Burnett and Goodman suggested a minor character that had recently appeared in the critically well-received episode of Batman Beyond, a robot named Zeta. This wasn't a character that had previously existed within the DC Comics canon. Goodman went in to pitch the idea to WB Brass and positioned the new potential spin-off as The Fugitive with a robot.
I didn't kill my wife! I don't care!
Each week, we would follow Zeta and Ro as they fled from the authorities and fell backwards into problems that needed to be solved. All the while, Zeta would be going in search of answers to his origins, the intentions of his creator, and the meaning of his existence. At first glance, a show about a killer robot who's starring as David Carradine in a futuristic animated version of Kung Fu seems like a hard sell. But it was quite the opposite. Goodman sold the pitch in the room, and they were quickly off to the races with their new cyberpunk android epic. Today, the show has almost been completely forgotten. It's been relegated to the distant corners of hardcore animation fans' memories. Even its ties to the broader DCAU are dubious at best. Terry McGinnis's Batman shows up in one episode, and one of the NSA special agents in the show is named West, with red hair, and is voiced by the Flash actor Michael Rosenbaum, but that's about it. A lot of this is due to the fact that the Zeta Project's initial conception was much darker than the finished product. Goodman wasn't aware of the impending changes of the guard during the pitching process. He wanted to push the limits of what was possible on a kid's daytime animated TV show. He wanted Zeta to truly be grappling with his internal killer tendencies. He wanted Ro, the young girl companion of Zeta's, to be constantly in peril because of her proximity to a literal assassin droid. He wanted the show to deal with issues of existential loneliness, grief, and guilt. He wanted the show to basically be about what would happen if a gun woke up one morning and realized it didn't want to hurt anyone anymore.
That thing thing wants to kill us.
It's just following its program.
That's what they said about you.
These early drafts of the show never saw the light of day, though. Goodman pulled influence from Gene Roddenberry's unrealized robot epic The Quester Tapes, which follows another robot looking for its creator, and the 1970s Incredible Hulk TV show, to craft the narrative structures of Zeta. However, most of these creative influences were watered down since the Zeta project was not produced by many of the stalwart creators who were involved in the other DCAU shows. There was generally a continuity of behind-the-scenes personnel from show to show. Many of the same directors, storyboard artists, and revisionists worked on every sequential DCAU show. However, due to a simultaneous convergence of scheduling and Kids WB execs wanting to shake things up, almost none of the Batman Beyond, Superman, Static Shock, or Batman crew worked on the visuals for Zeta, and you can feel it. Despite many of the writing crew making their way from other shows to Zeta, the show was given a mandate to age everything down to squarely appeal to the highly lucrative 6 to 11 demographic. Many of the directors and storyboard artists for Zeta came directly from Pinky and the Brain and the Animaniacs, with seasoned producer and director Liz Holtzman leading the charge. Only issue being that the highly refined and defined Bruce Timm art style that all the other shows had mastered proved exceedingly difficult for the primary comedy artists to master. This gave the whole show a bit of a clunky feel. The artwork didn't quite line up with the rest of the universe, and the stories were simultaneously a bit too immature.
Oh no, I'm so sorry. Here, let me get that.
What are you doing?
I'm sorry, I'm trying to help.
And trying to punch above their weight class. The show seemed like it was struggling to find its rhythm for the majority of its 2-season run. The main differences between how Zeta and the rest of the DCAU relate to each other are the fact that Zeta is primarily a comedy show with a dramatic engine. This was never an issue with the other shows, though. They always knew exactly what they were: an adventure show, a gothic romance, a tights and fights superhero showdown. They always had a clear and concise point of view on the subject matter. But Zeta seemed to be neither fish nor fowl. It's a funny show for little kids where the central character is a literal assassin on the run from the cops. The characters in Zeta also feel a bit undercooked. The primary antagonists are a team of NSA agents. However, they are attempted to be painted as shades of gray, not jingoistic pro-military types. But the attempted complexity here never quite clicks the way that you can feel the show needed. They were obviously working at a disadvantage with the Kids WB age bracket mandates. Watching the episodes, you can feel that there's a version of these stories that really has deep moral questions to ask, that interrogates the idea of policing, societal violence, and the nature of sentience. However, what you get is cheap jokes and slapstick comedy more often than not.
I've got you.
Cut! The shot's ruined!
What are you doing?
Even the characters of Ro and Z are undercooked as well. The show is more concerned with making sure Ro is a plucky female role model, attempting to help her connect with an increasingly female demographic, than they are with making her a really complex or nuanced character. Additionally, the characterization of Z and Ro's relationship is one note. He's existentially tormented and soft-spoken. She's upbeat and kinda sarcastic. But that's about it. There's no real growth over the course of the show, again, largely because it's aimed at little kids. But that's exactly what's so strong about the rest of the DCAU. The characterizations are spot on. Even when they were just making cartoons for kids, the animated incarnations of Batman and Superman are just as iconic, if not more iconic, as their live-action counterparts. From the writing to the visualization of the characters, they're effortlessly cool and instantly recognizable. Even the visual aesthetics of the world of the show just feels less interesting than the other programs. Think about the rain-drenched, moody Neo-Gotham from Batman Beyond, or the dark deco from Batman the Animated Series, or even the optimistic retro future of Superman. And then, look at this. Daytime, coffee shop, suburbia, rendered in the least interesting style imaginable. There's no sense of drama or tension in the environment at all. The scenic design doesn't have a voice in the way that the other shows have. Ultimately, Zeta Project was cancelled after 2 seasons. Unlike other DCAU characters like Batman Beyond or Static, he's never been brought back or integrated into future timeline narratives. The show occupies a very strange place in DCAU canon in that it's the last chronological show within the DCAU. The end of the Zeta Project is the end of the DC animated timeline, and yet, it's rarely referenced or acknowledged by the other properties in that shared universe, and the fans act similarly. There's a slight fondness based purely on the show being such an anomaly, However, it doesn't really extend past that. And maybe that's why Zeta Project is the Batman Beyond spinoff no one remembers.
Batman, Bruce Wayne, Batman. Or have you met?
Not now.
In a pre-MCU world, the DCAU was the crown jewel of superhero adapted media, and Justice League Unlimited seemed just about as good as it could get. And then, in the final episode of JLU Season 2, the show made the craziest turn it possibly could have.
Honey, Bruce didn't overwrite your DNA with his. I did.
The DCAU began in 1992 with the inaugural episode of Batman the Animated Series on Leather Wings, and ran until the final episode of Justice League Unlimited Season 3. Encompassing 8 TV shows, multiple direct-to-DVD films, and even a theatrical release, the DCAU was a towering achievement within the superhero media landscape, and Justice League is arguably the best show in the canon. Originally formatted as a 1-hour prestige format show focusing on the Big Seven, the show was then rebooted after its second season as a half-hour program with an emphasis on a much larger cast, faster-paced stories, and a world building that the DCAU had never previously seen. And yet, much like their 4-color counterparts, Justice League wasn't immune to many of the flaws and tropes of their artistic brethren. The story in question is the best example of a retcon that is simultaneously the strangest, most unpredictable thing that could have happened in the DCAU, and maybe its brightest stroke of genius. Today we're delving into JLU Season 2, Episode 13. Epilogue. Now, the key ingredient that makes Epilogue such a strange Season 2 finale is it's less a Justice League story and more a Batman Beyond story. For the record, Terry McGinnis's Batman appeared in multiple episodes of the Justice League shows, usually time travel stories like in the JLU Season 1 2-part finale, but the show never really incorporates Terry into its cast, which makes it all the stranger when Epilogue sees a 31-year-old Terry McGinnis breaking into the home of the shadowy government operative Amanda Waller in order to ask her some very pressing questions. He wants to know why he's an exact match for the DNA of Bruce Wayne. He wants to know why he's a clone. This concept was originally bandied about as being a sequel to Return of the Joker. It would have been a film that focused on the return of Dick Grayson's Nightwing and ultimately would resolve in Terry uncovering the fact that he was a clone of Bruce. However, the reaction to Return of the Joker was controversial, to say the least.
That's not funny.
Until Justice League dusted off the old Batman Beyond cowl and said, just watch this. Contrary to the usual formula of the show, Epilogue jumps back and forth in time, using a dialogue time transition, a call and response between the current and past versions of the characters. They're in dialogue with each other through time. This structure is visually delineated through a full-color modern setting and black and white past setting. In many ways, Batman Beyond was about Terry learning to inhabit the role of Batman. We saw him stumble and make mistakes and learn what it takes to be the Dark Knight. In Epilogue, we see him fully as Batman, and we also see what the ravages of time have done to Bruce. He's now a decrepit shadow of his former self. Justice League Unlimited has a global view on what it requires of an individual to be a hero. It follows an expanded cast of characters who are all working together from the Watchtower high above the Earth in orbit. It's a show about the joy of being a part of a large do-gooding team. Batman Beyond was never that, and as such, this episode is about the weight it takes to be Batman. Since the episode takes place 15 years after the events of Batman Beyond, we find Terry and his longtime girlfriend Dana are still dating, but can't get married due to Terry's fear that it would place her at too much risk if the villains in his rogues gallery ever discovered his secret identity. As the episode progresses and we get further and further into the personal life of Terry and Bruce's relationship, through these past and present call and response mechanics, we learn that Bruce claims he had no knowledge of Terry's DNA being altered. However, in a quintessential Bruce Wayne move, he makes no effort to console Terry or comfort him. He simply states that,
"It's a good thing that you're almost a clone of me. The world does need a Batman."
Back in the present, Amanda Waller tells Terry a story of how Batman went above and beyond to help a dying child who had immense psychic powers who could have destroyed Gotham. She tells it to Terry to attempt to illustrate that Bruce isn't a one-dimensional taskmaster devoid of human emotions. Terry doesn't believe it was out of kindness that Bruce helped her. Terry is convinced that it was a cynical ploy to attempt to manipulate the situation to his advantage. And this is where we get the biggest turn of the episode. Amanda Waller, chief antagonist of the Justice League throughout all the Cadmus arc, admits she did it. She altered Warren McGinnis's DNA using nanotechnology to make Terry not a clone, but a son of Bruce Wayne. In these sections of the episode, the flashbacks that have Amanda illustrating how she created Terry aren't in black and white. Why? Because thematically she's shedding light on Bruce's past. She's dispelling Terry's preconceived black and white view of his mentor. Ultimately, this conversation with Amanda reshapes Terry's perspectives, not only on Bruce, but on what it means to be Batman. Yes, the world will always need a Batman, but that doesn't mean it has to be a curse. It can mean whatever the individual makes it. This fate is what Terry must decide it's going to be. Batman has been the spine of the DCAU. He's been a central figure throughout its entire existence, so this episode, epilogue on a thematic level, serves as a coda to the entire universe. It's intended to bookend the decade plus of work, which makes it all the more risky that McDuffie, Tim, and Reba chose to do it with a retcon. They chose to build out a character that at the time was beloved into something that's hopefully more. But with this added context, would it be too much? Would there be a fan backlash that could take the legacy of the show? The idea that Terry initially thinks he's a clone of Bruce, but then ultimately realizes he's his heir, mirrors that real-life discourse perfectly. Additionally, the burden he's been given of the mantle of Batman is viewed as a curse, but it's actually a gift. That's a metatextual commentary on the DCAU as a whole. When Batman Beyond was first introduced, it was with the crass commercial goal of making a metaphorical clone of Batman the Animated Series show that would have followed Bruce as a young man. This was a mandate from WB execs. But since canonically Batman didn't fight crime as a teenager, Bruce Timm pitched the idea of shifting it to the future with an older Bruce mentoring a younger, new Batman. So for this Justice League Unlimited's supposed finale, to focus on Terry fully embracing the role of Batman and all that it means on his own terms, that's a beautiful thing. It's a meta-commentary on the next stage of the DCAU, the Justice League, and Batman. One that we'll never see, but one that is filled with promise. It's the perfect bookend to the entirety of the DCAU. This is symbolized by the final shots of the episode. We see Terry holding a wedding ring and asking Dana if they still have a date later that week. And when she agrees, we know that he's going to be Batman outside of Bruce's shadow. We know that he's choosing to be a Batman who has human connections. We then see shots that mirror the on leather wings, Batman flying through the city, and then a police officer saying, "Did you see that?" This all happens because Amanda Waller gives Terry the jarring line that sets him on his course.
You want to have a little better life than the old man's? Take care of the people who love you.
That's the emotional key to everything in this episode. Justice League Unlimited stands as one of the best runs of superhero stories ever, and Epilogue just might be the best story made during the show's run, which is all the more impressive because it doesn't utilize any of its primary cast members. From its themes of self-definition and examining the past, to the thrill of seeing the furthest point of the DCAU timeline and what old Bruce and Amanda are up to, the episode delivers on multiple levels, but always leaves you asking a central question. Will Terry succeed in embracing a better way of life than his predecessor? Maybe, maybe not. But the fact that he's trying, that's all that really matters.
Get in the car. That was a very dangerous maneuver.
This used to be how most people thought of Robert Pattinson. However, you can't keep a good heartthrob down. The young actor who quickly became a sex icon for a generation would reinvent himself through critically acclaimed indie darlings and big-budget studio projects alike into being one of the biggest stars on the planet. And the film that this fiery career rebirth can be linked back to just might surprise you.
If I can't change things here, if I can't have an effect, I don't care what happens to me.
Every great artist is forced to walk two paths at once. One leads down a direction of artistic fulfillment, the other manifests in commercial viability. Occasionally, these two roads lead to the same direction. However, usually, they are diametrically opposed. This crucible is something that all performers must navigate. However, few have done it in quite as unusual a way as Robert Pattinson. He initially rose to cultural prominence through his turn as Cedric Diggory in the 2005 film The Goblet of Fire. Sure, he appeared in supporting roles in small projects as a child, but it would be the stage that Potter granted him that would make everyone sit up and take notice.
For a moment there, I thought you were gonna let it get me. For a moment, so did I.
However, it would be 3 years later in 2008 that Pattinson would get his big break portraying Edward Cullen in the Twilight film series. Initially produced off a measly budget of $37 million, the film netted over $400 million at the box office and instantly propelled Kristen Stewart, Taylor Lautner, and Pattinson to international superstardom. Despite always keeping one foot in the indie sphere during this time with projects like Little Ashes, Love and Distrust, and Water for Elephants, it would be Twilight that would govern most of the next half-decade of Pattinson's career. From New Moon to Eclipse to the two-part finale Breaking Dawn, the franchise would firmly pigeonhole Pattinson as a teen heartthrob, sparkly vampire, and a wooden performer. At this point, Pattinson was something of a cultural punchline.
Hi, I'm Rob Pattinson. And sometimes when things bother me, I climb up in my little tree.
The Twilight films were looked down upon by wide swaths of movie-going public, and Pattinson made a delineated career choice. He wanted to be involved in artistically adventurous work. All throughout the multiple press tours of Twilight, Pattinson made it very clear he was not a fan of the franchise, the characters, or Stephenie Meyer's writing.
There's a lot of stuff in the Twilight world that doesn't make any sense. It's like, why are they still going to high school?
He wanted to be involved in smaller, more character-oriented projects, films that would allow him to push into more artistically fulfilling areas. And when you have the millions of dollars that the Twilight franchise netted him, you get to do that. In 2014, he had 2 projects debut: a futuristic western titled The Rover and Maps to the Stars, a satirically oriented Hollywood takedown picture directed by David Cronenberg, the latter of which won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival that year. Suddenly, Pattinson wasn't just a pretty face who had headlined a trashy YA vampire franchise. He was someone who had a real artistic presence, and someone who indie productions could cast who had enough name recognition to actually get their project financed. That, right there, is a winning combination. Was he accepted on a mainstream level? No, but within the who's who of the industry, he was re-cementing his reputation and displaying his capabilities. Following in rapid succession, Pattinson made Queen of the Desert, Life, and the slightly bigger budgeted The Lost City of Z, where he grew a beard and lost 35 pounds for his supporting role. However, it would be his next film, the neo-noir project Good Time, that would truly rebrand Pattinson and give him an escape velocity.
You're incredible, do you understand?
Yeah.
No, I'm serious. You guys could have done that without you standing next to me being strong.
No.
You feeling this?
As further testament to Pattinson's passion and drive to rebrand himself as something other than the face of the Twilight movies, the story of how he became involved in Good Times is highly unusual. One night, while surfing the internet, the young star happened across a still from an unreleased movie titled Heaven Knows What. It struck a chord with him. He tracked down the directors, having never seen any of their work, and suggested that they work together.
I get very fixated on people I want to work with.
At the time, the Safdie brothers were attempting to make a movie about the Diamond District in New York that would later become Uncut Gems. However, when Pattinson reached out to them, they quickly realized that they needed to write something specifically for him.
And I said, I want to do whatever you guys are doing next, I want to do it. And I remember Josh saying, do you mean that? Because I'll have a script in 6 weeks.
The resulting film is a stripped-down thriller about a low-level criminal attempting to scrape together bail money to prevent his developmentally disabled brother from going to a maximum security prison. The film's pulsing score, dynamic camera work, and gritty aesthetic were a hit with audiences and critics alike. However, it was Pattinson's acting and his commitment to the role that took center stage. During the press tour for the film, Pattinson and the Safdie brothers repeatedly told stories where they would take Pattinson out in public, his hair dyed blonde, and role play with him. They went to an auto body shop, they ate at Dunkin' Donuts, and they even worked for a day at a car wash, all the while totally in character.
He got this experience of what it's like to be hanging out with your friends, but also have this kind of person with you who doesn't necessarily belong and isn't included in the group.
Benny Safdie would perform publicly as his mentally handicapped character, forcing Pattinson to react and interact with people in his American accent to diffuse situations. The goal of these performances was to accurately replicate what it would feel like to have a long-standing relationship with someone who you're completely responsible for, to instill in both actors a sense of weighted history. The connection between the two performers is evident in the finished film.
My brother is mentally handicapped. The bucket of paint fell off a construction truck and hit him on the head. I'm gonna come out in 1 second. It's an emergency, all right? Please just give me 5 minutes.
Pattinson truly feels like a man at the end of his rope. His animalistic frustration and lived-in anxiety don't feel like a performance. They feel like a document of real-world trauma. Good Time positioned Pattinson as a creative force to be taken seriously in critical circles and on a mainstream level. The film, produced on a budget of $2 million, was a breakout hit.
Look, losers like you are incapable of taking care of themselves. You're either leeching off mommy, or leeching off welfare, or living off the government in jail. That's you!
You don't know the first thing about me, bro.
This, paired with his 2019 film The Lighthouse, legitimized Pattinson in a way that could never have been predicted. Yes, of course, people knew him as the guy from the Twilight movies, but Pattinson's genuine commitment to the craft of acting and a passion for pursuing artistically avant-garde projects manifested in a near-complete reversal of how he was perceived. He went from being a pretty face into becoming one of the most respected actors of a generation.
The Queen of England's old fancy housekeeper couldn't even done no better than what I done, because I tell you, I scrubbed this here place twice over.
And I say you did nothing of the sort.
This led to 2020, the year Pattinson appeared in Christopher Nolan's Tenet, and he was cast in a new Batman project. Released in 2022, The Batman was one of the most critically acclaimed and widely beloved superhero movies released that year. And Pattinson's shamanic and ghost-like performance in the film was heralded as a bold new interpretation of the iconic nocturnal vigilante.
The hell are you supposed to be?
I'm vengeance.
This casting was a direct reflection of Pattinson's work over the past 5 years, a surprising payoff for his interest in exploring the bizarre and the unusual. Cultural reinvention is the most difficult task any actor has, to shed the skin of the person they've been performing as and develop a new persona, to pivot and evolve as an artist. Very few creative people can manifest this in their career, let alone when you're at the top of a financial hill and could easily ride the typecasting gravy train and never have to work a day in your life. But that's not what Pattinson did. He chose to walk both paths, be mindful of the commercial realities of his work, but never let them dictate his artistic decisions.
What happened to your voice?
What do you mean, what happened to my voice?
I heard you by the bridge. I know what a girl sound like.
We love superheroes. From their meteoric rise to prominence in the 1930s to their cultural ubiquity of today, they've become a symbol for moral fortitude in the eternal quest to defend the downtrodden. And yet, recently there's been a palpable homogeneity specifically in the way they speak. So, why do all superheroes sound the same?
You mocking me? He's trying to copy me. You're imitating the God-Man.
Superman, Batman, Blade, Spider-Man, and the X-Men. Their film adaptations provided the cultural foundation that the House of Ideas built the MCU on. Despite the wave of successful comic book adaptations that appeared throughout the 2000s, the first film to really give a superhero a quirky, funny, and sardonic personality was 2008's Iron Man. The film's credited screenwriters are Mark Fergus, Hawk Ostby, Art Markham, and Matt Holloway. However, Robert Downey Jr. and Jon Favreau used the script for Iron Man 1 in a highly unconventional manner. They used it as something to play off of, not film. Large chunks of the film were completely improvised on the day by the director and star. Thus, the film has a naturalistic yet hyper-stylized patter to the dialogue. And most importantly, it was funny.
If you douse me again and I'm not on fire, I'm donating you to City College.
This seems like an obvious path to take at this point, considering how it's almost a requirement for the genre, but in 2008, this was a true deviation, and one that would prove wildly successful for everyone involved. Michael Keaton, a literal comedian prior to the role, wasn't funny as Batman. Daredevil, Ghost Rider, Catwoman, none of these films were funny, unless you were laughing at them. Arguably the greatest innovation that Iron Man and the MCU made to the newly blossoming genre was taking a joke-a-minute view on the source material. How do we get people to fall in love with objectively obscure characters like Moon Knight? Make them funny and charming.
She said I needed a suit. The ceremonial armor from Concha's temple, not Psycho Colonel Sanders.
The MCU's movies are basically built off having characters banter. But this banter-oriented way of making superheroes speak has its roots all the way back in the comic books. It's hard to overemphasize the effect that Brian Bendis had on the comic book form in the early 2000s. He pioneered the decompressed model of telling stories and brought a real human lens to the characters who had been stagnant for decades. Starting with his Daredevil, Alias, Ultimate Spider-Man work, and running through New Avengers and Secret Invasion work, Bendis took traditional superheroes and made them feel human, primarily due to dialogue. Bendis' chief creative inspiration was David Mamet. The playwright and screenwriter behind Glengarry Glen Ross and Ronin is recognized for his ear for dialogue, extensive monologues, and hyper-specific verbal tics.
A always be B, C closing. Always be closing.
Bendis took these tropes and incorporated them, along with a deep love of crime and genre fiction, into a way of building superhero stories that hasn't been rivaled in the last 30 years. He loves long stretches of dialogue where characters are rapid-fire asking each other questions. He loves quick short bursts back and forth, and specifically, he loves jokes. His DNA is laced all throughout the Marvel films, to say nothing of the fact that he was a founding member of the Marvel Creative Committee, which was a closed-door club of comic book writers that Marvel contracted to consult on all the film projects to try and make them as accurate as possible. As the first phase of the Marvel Universe was gaining momentum, the inevitable question was raised. Who is going to direct the Avengers?
Why the hell should I take orders from you? I need men in those buildings.
They wanted someone who had a keen knack for character, love of Marvel, and an ability to actually adapt a script to the screen. And so, Marvel hired Joss Whedon. Similarly to Bendis, Whedon had made a name for himself through his strong sense of characterization and emphasis on fast-paced, snappy dialogue, which were typically littered with pop culture references. Primarily known as the creator of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Whedon had also worked on the Eisner Award-winning Astonishing X-Men run. A longtime fan of the characters in question, Whedon was responsible for taking what Favreau had established with Downey Jr. and pushing it even further. He really played up the man-out-of-time elements of Cap, the snarkiness of Stark, and the general humor that would be mined out of bouncing the Avengers off of one another. Needless to say, The Avengers was a smash hit, and Marvel signed Whedon to an exclusive contract to write, develop, and consult on all their projects for the next 3 years. This run would eventually come to an end with Age of Ultron not performing quite as well, and Whedon feeling like he was undercut by the studio.
Oh, actually, he's the boss. I just pay for everything and design everything and make everyone look cooler.
Now, by this point, the Marvel machine was a juggernaut, and everyone was trying to get in on the bandwagon, or rebelling against the status quo that Marvel was establishing. The first wave of the DCEU, orchestrated by Zack Snyder, was directly in opposition to the bright and accessible MCU. It was attempting to be a more grounded and adult take on superheroes. It was also trying to embrace gravitas over comedic timing. In theory, that could have worked as an alternative, but in execution, it became something else.
What are your superpowers again?
I'm rich.
Which leads us directly into Justice League. This proved as the trying ground for the does one-size-fit-all approach to dialogue and character execution. Joss Whedon accepted the job of rewriting and refilming large chunks of Justice League after Zack Snyder was forced to step away from the picture. And that's how you get moments like this.
Oh, something is definitely bleeding.
Look, we don't need to rehash it. Justice League was not well received. However, the most important fallout from it was that it made Warner's want to steer away from the dark and gritty stuff they were doing, aside from one-off projects like Joker or The Batman, and have a more bombastic all-ages feel to their mainline cinematic universe. Shazam, Aquaman, and others emphasize a stylistic approach that veers into a more Marvel-adjacent mode of telling stories, namely jokes.
Unbelievable!
Your mileage may vary on if Warner's is fully replicating the Marvel magic, but this issue is something the comics struggle with too, especially when a new writer gets moved up to an A-list level. They get put on a bunch of books and they don't have time to develop unique approaches for their takes. It just becomes the easiest stock solution wins. Every character has the same dialogue style now. In Bendis' critically acclaimed X-Men run and his new Avengers run, multiple characters use Yiddish words or turns of phrases in contexts that aren't exactly true to their character. Fans have pointed out that all of Bendis' characters sound exactly the same. Everyone is quippy and has bouncing dialogue. Everyone. Wolverine doesn't make jokes, unless Bendis is writing him, which is the exact same thing that happened in superhero movies. We used to have the archetype of the stalwart hero and the plucky comic relief. And now we just have the sarcastic hero who cracks jokes at the other character's expense.
I think you're overreacting a little bit.
You must be so embarrassed!
At this point, being a superhero means you have to be funny. Overall, we're reaching such a cultural breaking point with superhero media that there's no way around it. The issue at hand is that there's literally billions of dollars wrapped up in weaponizing these stories to be hyper-commercialized, and the most financially successful versions of the characters have all shared a common voice, a predilection for lifting dialogue and snappy banter. Only problem is, that formula is already old, so what comes next?
This school sees more of Batman than it does of you.
You can't even joke about this, understand?
It just slipped out.
Terry McGinnis might be one in a long line of young protégés that the Dark Knight has taken on. But the Batman of Neo Gotham has proven to be enduringly popular in his own right. And yet, The final episode of Batman Beyond, titled Unmasked, wasn't even remotely a finale. It was just a run-of-the-mill adventure. This has left fans with a constantly lingering question. Why wasn't Batman Beyond given a proper send-off?
I've got some questions I need you to answer.
Of course you do, boy.
Batman Beyond, created by Bruce Timm, Paul Dini, and Alan Burnett, was the fourth show in the DC animated universe. Long before the MCU and the DCEU, the ongoing animated continuity of DC-based comic book shows ruled the kids' WB for close to a decade. On paper, this show shouldn't work. There are already 5 highly beloved Robins that could work perfectly for a protege story. Why create a new character? Well, the answer is simple. Terry, not having any of the baggage of the Robins, is a perfect audience conduit. His fresh perspective on the world of Gotham allowed an entire generation of fans to discover the mysteries of the darker side of the DCAU. The show is a wonderfully precise blend of teen drama, emotionally raw character development, high-stakes action-adventure, and the quintessential neo-noir that everyone has come to expect from a Batman show.
Have you considered checking into Arkham for a little R&R, Doc? Because quite frankly, you're nuts.
Fans of the show will know that the 3rd season boasts some of the most exciting installments in the continuing adventures of Terry McGinnis. Gotham's Dark Prince is pushed to the brink in hair-raising episodes like Out of the Past, the episode that features a reincarnated Ra's al Ghul, or the 2-parter The Call, which showcases a new version of the Justice League. These are especially fun due to the fact that Batman Beyond rarely brought back characters from Bruce Wayne's rogues gallery. However, in 2001, after just 3 seasons and 52 episodes, Batman Beyond ended. None of the fun or inventiveness that was showcased in the previous episodes are anywhere to be found in the final episode of Batman Beyond.
If a few more people knew your secret, life might be a lot easier for you.
Oh yeah, just like with the Diaz kid. Remember how easy that got?
Unmasked, the 13th episode of Season 3, follows Terry as he reveals his face to a young boy, inadvertently making him a target of the sinister terrorist called Cobra. It's a low-stakes Adventure of the Week episode. In fact, it wasn't even intended to be the ending of the show. During the run of the final season, there were some production hiccups and the episode was not aired on the kids' WB. It was released on Cartoon Network close to 6 months after the previous episode was aired. The lackluster episode is an attempt at showcasing why Terry is so guarded with his secret identity. It all takes place in flashback, as Terry tells his best friend Max about the one time he let his guard down and allowed someone to see his face. The fact that it all happens in flashback makes it feel less than vital. It's just not a satisfying ending to a series that basically did the impossible. It actually created an heir for Bruce Wayne. Years later, the show would get a spiritual series finale in the Justice League episode Epilogue. But that still begs the question, why didn't Beyond have a finale? Bruce Timm had this to say.
We never actually got like an official cancellation notice. We eventually just stopped making the show and we were all moving on to other projects and stuff, so it's just the way it goes.
That seems a little hard to believe, doesn't it? That they simply ran their course and then never thought about doing a final episode? Well, that's because it's not the whole story. As the brain trust behind the DCAU were wrapping up Season 3 of Batman Beyond, they were starting to plan what a Season 4 could look like, when word came down from above that Cartoon Network and the WB were giving the green light to a Justice League show. This caused everyone involved in Beyond to pivot. They had 52 episodes, which was the required amount for children's daytime syndication, so as far as the higher-ups were concerned, the show had been a success. No need to put more money into it. It could now begin to recoup its investment by running in perpetuity to children of all ages. From their perspective, the DCAU Brain Trust was better allocated to be tackling the considerably difficult challenge bringing DC's Big 7 to the small screen.
Each of you brings something different to the table. Each of us is willing to make the sacrifices a hero needs to make, even the ultimate one.
Some discussion was also had about continuing Batman Beyond in the form of a sequel movie. The plan for this movie would have featured Catwoman and a recently returned to Gotham, Dick Grayson. The climax of the film would have been Dick confessing to Terry that the two main reasons he left Gotham were that Bruce began dating Barbara Gordon, something Dick viewed as a betrayal, and the fact that Terry was secretly a clone of Bruce. Obviously, the latter of the two plot points was used in the Justice League episode, Epilogue.
It's a good thing that you're almost a clone of me. The world does need a Batman, and it always will.
This sequel film never materialized because Return of the Joker underperformed on VHS and DVD. Batman Beyond appeared to be dead in the water, with a less than stellar send-off. But unlike so many characters, Terry didn't get relegated to the dust-covered back issue bins of history. The character proved enduringly popular. Over the course of Justice League, Terry would appear in Once and Future Thing Part 1, Weird Western Tales, Once and Future Thing Part 2, Time Warped, and of course, arguably the best episode of the show, Epilogue. Despite Batman Beyond now having a definitive send-off, the fan clamor for more Beyond episodes hasn't stopped. At San Diego Comic-Con, in a panel discussing the 20th anniversary Blu-ray box set of Batman Beyond, Bruce Timm talked about a continuation of the show, saying,
"If this thing sells like crazy on Blu-ray, it creates a giant buzz, that would make it more possible that it'll happen."
It's been a few years since Bruce Timm said that, and still no movement, despite constant rumors of a live-action Batman Beyond film fitting somewhere within the broader planes of the DC universe. It's a real testament to the strength of storytelling quality that the team put together. Close to 20 years later, this show is still being discussed, dissected, and re-evaluated. The fact that the corporate higher-ups didn't see the benefit of continuing Batman Beyond, and the fact that Bruce Timm and company weren't aware that this order of 13 would be their final run of the show, is a shame. It really does showcase how much of the television landscape has changed. Today, when there's even an inkling that it might be a character's final at-bat, the creators do their best to send them off into the sunset.
The real heroes, they're the ones who have to keep going. So keep going.
What started out as a blatant cash grab attempt at pulling in a younger demographic for a Batman in high school show was developed into one of the cornerstones of the modern DC universe. Terry has a fan base all his own, a merchandising empire built off of him, and a constant cry for more content based on him. And all of this in spite of the fact that his show literally doesn't have an ending.
I'm gonna disarm them, and then you'll engage. Punch him. Come on, Barbie.
Let's go party?
The Flash, the Scarlet Speedster, the fastest man alive. Created in 1940, he appeared in countless comics, 2 separate live-action TV shows, and has evolved into the patron saint of little kids who love to run. And yet, the one thing that's always eluded the Scarlet Speedster is a feature film. Tragically, the recently released filmic debut was less a celebration paying tribute to 80 years of the character and more an attempt to resurrect the dead on multiple fronts.
You should seek the services of a mental health professional. The Justice League is not very good at that part yet. Trust me.
And also be warned, this video will have major spoilers in it. The road to getting the Flash on the big screen was long and laborious.
That feels like an oversimplification.
There were iterations of Central City's finest going all the way back to the 90s. However, the most recent permutations were all centered around Ezra Miller's bafflingly weird and distinctly awkward version of Barry Allen.
Abrasion resistant? Heat resistant?
Yeah, I do competitive ice dancing.
It's what they use on the space shuttle to prevent it from burning up on re-entry.
I do very competitive ice dancing.
There was the Lord and Miller version, the Rick Famuyiwa version, and then the attempt that was written by god-tier comic book writer Grant Morrison and Ezra Miller themselves in just 2 short weeks. However, the version we got was much less a Flash origin story and more a simultaneous swan song for the DCEU and an attempted corporate rebirth, intended as a potential rewriting of the universe, which coincidentally lined up with James Gunn and Peter Safran taking over as the new heads of DC Studios. The film had a very large role to play in the prospective future of this DC universe.
These worlds are colliding and collapsing. We did this.
The film sees Barry Allen traveling back in time in order to try and find a way to rewrite history and save his mother's life. What he doesn't expect is that this will alter the course of time itself and create an almost infinite number of problems. And yet there's one problem with the movie that feels like it bleeds across the line from the cinematic happenings of The Flash and encroaches on our world.
There was just no way to recover from that.
Just let it go.
Well, I'd really love to stay and clean up more mess, but this little superhero needs his breakfast.
Goodbye, Flash.
During the third act of The Flash, Barry Allen and his new BFF, 18-year-old Barry Allen, enter a time bubble and witness countless alternate realities. So what, are we gonna get the Grant Gustin version of the character? Maybe the John Wesley Shipp version from the 90s? How about Michael Rosenbaum's Wally West from the Bruce Timm animated show?
We're supposed to be conducting an investigation.
Can I help it if I have a hyper-accelerated metabolism? Besides, it's just a little snack.
No? We're getting Superman and Batman cameos, but not Henry Cavill or Brandon Routh or Christian Bale. We're getting George Reeves, the Superman from the 1950s TV show.
Up in the sky! It's a bird! It's a plane! It's Superman!
It feels a little disrespectful bringing back a dead person to play this iconic character again. Oh, and then we're doing another cameo of Superman, and it's Christopher Reeve, and de-aged Helen Slater, and Nick Cage as Superman, and an Adam West Batman. If you're trying to spike a bit of nostalgia in your $200 million superhero story, this is the way to do it. There's only one problem. These people are no longer alive. Well, with the exception of Nick Cage and Helen Slater, but you get the idea. The whole thesis of The Flash is that Barry needs to learn the lesson that sometimes there are situations that are just unwinnable. There are circumstances that you can't find a way to bargain with, so all you can do is accept the tragedy of those moments. This isn't even subtext to the story. During one scene, his mother literally says,
"Not every problem has a solution. Sometimes you just have to let go."
The act of digitally resurrecting George Reeves, Christopher Reeve, and Adam West feels as if it flies in the face of what this movie is literally about. It works counter to the expressed mission statement of the piece.
Nobody dies!
Barry.
Not every problem has a solution.
And to make it even weirder, these were just the ones that actually made it to the screen. When talking to Vanity Fair, director Andy Muschietti revealed that there was a whole laundry list of other actors who were planned but were ultimately scrapped. Marlon Brando's Jor-El, Cesar Romero's Joker, and Burgess Meredith's Penguin, just to name a few. Again, according to the director, the existing cameos that were included in the film were all done above board and with permissions. When talking to Games Radar, Muschietti said, "As long as they were DC characters, everything was allowed. I made a list of superheroes that I love, that I would love to see, and it was a long list." This just begs a simple question. Who is allowing this? George Reeves died possibly by a self-inflicted wound, or maybe in an altercation with studio fixer Eddie Mannix in 1959. Accounts and opinions vary. Reeves led a conflicted life post his turn as Superman and felt that he was trapped by the role. There's many dissenting accounts on if he did in fact end his own life, but what is a commonly accepted fact is that he struggled with his relationship to the Man of Steel. Christopher Reeve died in 2004 and Adam West in 2017. Who is giving permission for these actors' likenesses to be used? You might be saying to yourself that Christopher Reeve would have probably loved to see himself up on the big screen in all his glory, considering the tragedy that befell him later in life. An old interview clip of him expressing the exact opposite is actually true.
What the majors do is you take what grossed $100 million domestically last year and get the key ingredients back again and try to pump it up a few more times. Of course, the quality is a sliding scale of diminishing returns.
Yeah, kind of sounds like he probably wouldn't have wanted his likeness to be used this way, doesn't it? To add an even more confusing element to the story, The Flash features a version of Jay Garrick's Silver Age Flash. The big screen version of the character looks a hell of a lot like the version of the character portrayed on the CW Speedster TV show by actor Teddy Sears. When asked if he had shot a cameo for the film, Sears responded, "People kept telling me that I was in the new Flash movie, but I'm pretty sure I would have remembered shooting a major DC Studios film." Scary, isn't it? But here's the question at hand. Where do we draw the line? Where does it become immoral to resurrect these great icons of cinema and have them turned into digital marionettes for a cooing, infantilized audience of people who just want a moment's respite from the difficulties of existence?
Barry, this is inevitable. We can try 1,000,000 times and we're not going to be able to fix this no matter what we do. This world dies.
How do we parse the simple fact that life's impermanence is the very thing that gives it meaning? Collectively, as a culture, we seem to be processing the grief and trauma over the past few years through the growing trend of multiverse movies. We all seem to be suspended in a life ruled by what-ifs, or what could have happened. And these decrepit computer-animated confections are the perfect example of how deeply our culture is yearning for pasts and futures that never were. However, the most disturbing aspect of this trend is that with the advent of the rapidly evolving artificial intelligence landscape, we are definitely looking down the barrel of more. This isn't a one-off, oh that was in poor taste overstepping of a movie studio. This is going to be the future.
They want to reach their hand into the till again and come up with a fistful of gold, and they don't always want to put out what it takes to make the quality.
It's literally only a matter of time before we get massive blockbusters starring de-aged and digitally resurrected icons from cinematic eras past. Pre-order your tickets to Superman, the soon-to-be-announced reboot starring a digitally necromancied Christopher Reeve, a film that feels eerily familiar and laced with a milky sense of deja vu. Turn off your phone and just stop thinking.
Let go of Mom? She'll always be alive somewhere in time. Always. It's not for us.